Hi, welcome to Reading Closely, my new booktube channel. This is the second video in my multi-part series on Oscar Wilde's novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray. In the last video, which was my first ever, I focused on the publication history of the novel and the editions that were available in Oscar Wilde's lifetime. In this video, I've decided to look especially at the themes and characters. If we have time, I'll talk a bit about point of view, imagery, and style. And then in future videos, I want to zoom in and really look at it more closely and focus on, in particular, the opening chapters of the novel and the preface. Now, you're probably familiar with the basic premise of the novel. Dorian Gray, the title character, is a very handsome young man, in fact, a beautiful young man, whose picture is being painted by an artist named Basil Hallward. Basil Hallward is visited by a very good friend of his, Lord Henry, who is smitten with Dorian Gray, well, first by the picture itself, and then when he meets him, by the subject of the picture, Dorian Gray. And it's because of some things that Lord Henry says to Dorian that he first has the reflections that set the whole plot into motion. "How sad it is," murmured Dorian Gray, with his eyes still fixed upon his own portrait. "How sad it is! I shall grow old and horrid and dreadful, but this picture will remain always young. It will never be older than this particular day of June. If it was only the other way, if it was I who were to be always young, and the picture that were to grow old. For this I would give everything." So the novel seems to begin as a story about aging and the quest for eternal youth and beauty. But it soon becomes a different story, less about the deterioration of the body and more about the degradation of the soul and Dorian's loss of innocence. Because the picture doesn't just age, but it also changes in ways that reflect the thoughts and the actions of Dorian Gray as he changes over time. Now, The Picture of Dorian Gray is a rich, multifaceted novel. You can get a lot of different meanings out of it. So I'd just like to draw attention to two principal themes that are interesting to me. First, the shaping of personality. The novel implicitly raises questions about what influences the people that we become over time. What's the role of nature versus nurture, free choice versus fate or destiny? And interestingly, the idea of the creation of self as a creation of a work of art. The personality as a work of art. This brings us to the second major theme that I want to talk about, which is art itself and its relationship to life. On the level of plot, this novel addresses painting, of course, also music. Dorian Gray is a musician, and theater, because one of the characters introduced later in the novel is an actress. And implicitly, it's also a story about literature itself. So there's a kind of a meta-commentary or self-referential aspect going on where we can assume that some of the ideas expressed about the other arts and art in general also apply to literature and, in fact, this work of fiction that we are reading, this novel. As with the other major theme, the shaping of personality, the treatment of this theme of art raises big questions, in this case about the production as well as the reception of art. Where does it come from? What inspires it? Where does meaning lie, in the artist or in the audience? What does art reveal and what does it conceal? And finally, what is art's purpose? These themes are explored largely through the characters. So beginning with the title character, Dorian Gray. When we first meet him, Dorian Gray is about 20. He's very young for 20. He's described as a lad, a boy, and he has an element to him that makes him seem very pure and unformed. It's as if he's capable of anything, positive or negative, at this stage in his life. In this sense, it's worth paying attention to Dorian Gray's name. I'll talk a little bit about his first name in one of my next videos, but at the moment I just want to draw attention to his last name, Gray, as suggesting a kind of ambiguity. His soul is kind of gray and unformed, and he could go either way. Basil Hallward, of course, is the artist, but he's also very straight-laced Victorian, so there's an interesting tension going on in Basil. We know him mainly through his feelings for Dorian Gray, and these feelings go beyond admiration. Dorian, again, is his inspiration, his artistic inspiration, like his muse. There's also a very strong undercurrent of physical attraction to Dorian, but this is in many ways sublimated or elevated, so that to Basil, Dorian is not, at least on the surface, an object of physical desire, but more, again, a muse or an inspiration. Finally, we have Lord Henry, who is a friend to Basil at the beginning of the novel and very soon becomes a friend, a good friend for Dorian Gray. Lord Henry is, I think, the most multidimensional and fascinating character in this novel. He's attractive and amusing. He seems to sort of float or skate through life, and you never really know if he quite means what he says. And Lord Henry soon becomes the most powerful influence in Dorian Gray's life. In fact, he's a kind of a creator in his own right, an artist, in that just as Basil has created this picture of Dorian Gray, Lord Henry is shaping Dorian Gray himself. Now, all three of these characters lead double lives. They're only partially revealed to us. So although the narrator is omniscient, or seems to be, when we get point of view, it's principally through two characters. First Lord Henry, and then increasingly through the point of view of Dorian Gray. Interestingly, we never or almost never get the point of view of Basil Hallward, the artist. So the artist figure in this novel remains the most secretive of all of the characters. Because both Lord Henry and Dorian Gray experience the world very sensually, what we get is rich imagery that is evoking all of the senses. So we're seeing and we're hearing, we're smelling, we're tasting, we're feeling everything in this world. And the result is this rich variety of images, sometimes having deeper meanings, and sometimes they seem to be there simply because of the beauty of these experiences themselves. I'll have more to say about the style of the novel as I proceed with the close reading of it, but right now I just wanted to quote another booktuber, Books with Dylan. I'll provide his link below, but I like some of his comments about Oscar Wilde's style in this novel. Dylan says that Wilde is like an artist with his words, and Dylan comments on the tone of elegance that pervades the novel despite the horror of the material itself. So that's an overview of some of the principal themes and characters, the point of view, the imagery, and the style of the Picture of Dorian Gray. If you want a plot summary, I would recommend some other booktube channels. I'll link one in particular below, Creative Liberties, where I think you can get a really nice summation of the plot. In general, this is not a strength of mine, summarizing plot, and so you won't get much plot summation on this channel. Instead, I'll be offering more analysis. So that's what I'll be doing in my next video in this series. I'll begin by looking at the preface, and then I'll go on and look at the first 3 chapters. If you want to hear more about the Picture of Dorian Gray, subscribe to this channel, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I will be back next week. In the meantime, I welcome your feedback in the comments box below.